Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of Sloan the Record, recording on February 6th and publishing on February 16th, 2025. My name is Nathan Sloan, and I'm joined once again by my father, Ron. Each week we're going on the record about family history, and along the way we'll see if we can't learn more of the people, traditions, values, and stories that made us, all while opening up a window for everyone else to see a little slice of life in rural North Carolina. New episodes are published on Sundays, and we appreciate every listener. You can make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or the Podbean app. Hey, Dad. Thanks for joining me.
Hey. Hope you're doing well.
Well, I'm doing well right now. We'll see how my nerves hold up with baby boy Sloan right on the horizon. And that is a good reminder if you're wondering why we're recording this almost 2 weeks before it's going to publish, or 10 days before it's going to publish. It's because Emily's still pregnant. Her due date was just a few days ago, 4 days ago on February 2nd. And so by the time you're hearing this episode as a listener, hopefully there's already baby Sloan back at the house, and we're doing all of that. So the next episode that we record, maybe that will be some kind of fresh perspective on becoming a father, and the roles can be reversed a little bit, and maybe Dad will be asking me questions about how that went. We'll see. But want to do a quick recap on last week's episode before we move forward on the subject for this week. So last week was the college experience for Dad at East Carolina University in the late 60s and early 70s. And I told him to leave one important bit out, and that's what we're going to talk about this week. A very special woman, my mother, Susan Searle Sloan. And before we go any further into that, I do want to acknowledge why Mom's not being interviewed for this right now. I would love to be able to have her on here and get her perspective, because she always gave some great opposing perspective to Dad's stories growing up. Mom is still living. In fact, she's never too far away from where Dad is, even right now. But she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease almost 4 years ago. And as a result, she can't communicate well enough to be interviewed anymore. But her spirit and her amazing heart are still so evident, despite everything that she's dealt with. To anyone who knows a family member or a friend who's faced this disease, it is incredibly difficult, and it has deeply affected all of us. But these last few years are not going to be the years that define my mom's life. She is an incredible woman, and I'm excited to take a look back in this episode to a season of her life that made my very existence possible. And that's the story of how Mom and Dad met, started dating, and got married. So I do want to do another episode that focuses on the rest of Mom's life, since this is just going to be one little window, and how much she's meant to all of us. And I plan on doing that at some point in the next few weeks. But for now, we are going to focus on this particular moment. So I've heard this story several times at different points in my life, with different details coming out at different times. But maybe, Dad, you can throw a couple of surprises in there, or things you hadn't told me about before. But maybe not. It'd just be good to have it recorded and get these details down. So without further ado, how did you meet Mom, and what do you remember about that first encounter?
It was a very difficult thing to accomplish, to tell you the truth. I had a class, an English class, in the Austin building. And when that class was out, I went next door to the Raw building, which was the art building where all of my major classes were held. I would be going from the Austin building to the Raw. And on one trip over, as I started down the steps, I saw this blonde girl coming up the walk to come up the steps. And she was just stunning. She had on this kind of fuchsia-colored London fog raincoat. I just watched her go by that first day and thought, wow. And since it was a 5-hour class, I had that class every day. So I looked for that raincoat. It was the winter quarter, and she had that full-length coat. So when she showed up the second day, then I started laying out my plans for how I could meet her. So I thought, I'll open the door for her when she comes up, and she'll be glad that I opened the door for her, and she'll speak to me or she'll say something. And I thought, well, when she does that, then I'll just follow her on in and talk to her, going to her class or something. And so the next time I tried that, it didn't work. She just breezed by me like I was vapor. I mean, went right by. And but I kept persisting. And this is crazy, but every day I was there waiting behind the door. She made me late to my class most days because she was always late. And made it easier to spot her because the crowd was thinner, but it would make me late. Sometimes I did give up and go on to my class, but never had any luck. Kept trying. And then the semester changed, or the quarters. We were on the quarter system. And we went into the spring quarter, and as the weather warmed up, patterns changed. I had no idea where her classes were, who she was, where she stayed. Just that she had this long fuchsia London fog coat. But with the warm weather, the coat went away. So I really had just kind of given up on it. And
what was this your freshman year, your sophomore year, junior?
I think this was my third year there.
Okay.
I believe that's right. And I think, I'm pretty sure that was it. Got into the spring quarter, and I wasn't going home all that often. And the only way I could get home was to catch a ride with somebody that was going that direction. And I called a friend from Lillington who was a nursing student there, Doris Cameron, and asked her if I could catch a ride home one day. And she said, well, Ron, I've already got myself and 3 girls. And I said, well, that Buick will hold 5. And she said, well, the seating's not the problem, it's the luggage. These girls carry a lot of things. And I said, well, I am a master repacker. I mean, I can get stuff in a car. Besides only carrying a laundry bag with my stuff packed in that, I don't have a suitcase or anything. And I said, I can cram that in a fender or something. And she said, well, I'll come by your dorm. If you'll be out there at the steps, I'll come by your dorm. If we can get your stuff in the car, we can go. So sure enough, I managed to move stuff around and get it all in there. And she said, you'll have to get in on the passenger side, which was, it was a 2-door car, the size of a Chevelle. It was, I forget the model, but it was a Buick. So I went around to the passenger side, and Sharon Mangum was sitting in the passenger seat, and she pulled the lever and leaned her seat forward, and I kind of backed in because of the angle, and sat down, and I was kind of sitting at an angle with my back towards whoever was sitting beside me as I got in, and I turned a little bit to try to get more comfortable, and I looked down and I saw this long tan leg. It was a good-looking leg, and I said, So I took my arm and swung it up and over to go around behind me on the back of the seat so I could turn. And as I turned, I saw Kathy Stewart on the far side. And, it was either Kathy or Janice. It may have been Janice. And then as I turned further, I saw the girl that wore a red raincoat, the London fog. She was sitting between me and the Stewart girl. And I sucked in air. I could not believe it. That, that after searching for her in that whole semester, quarter, I had looked for her again on campus, just hoping I'd spot her, and I never did. So she was going to 4 Oaks, It's where she said she lived, and I introduced myself, and she said her first impression was I was flirting with all the girls in the car, but I don't recall that. I think it was just a miscommunication on her part, but I was just being friendly to the girls. But anyway, we struck up a conversation, talked a little bit. She was very shy. I'd even told one of the guys in my suite about her, and said she's prettiest thing I've ever seen. But man, she's got beautiful eyes. And I said, but she is the most stuck-up girl I have ever seen. She will not look right nor left. She won't speak. I'll say good morning or how you doing or whatever, And she never speaks. She just goes right by. I thought she was terribly stuck up. But when I got in the car and started talking to her, I realized it was right the opposite. She was very shy and very timid, almost like she was self-conscious. And I couldn't believe that. But I mentioned before, I think my dad was a natural salesman, and I tried to call on all those genes for that 45 minutes or so that I figured I had to find out what I could find out and see if I could create any interest. I found out where she lived and on campus and so forth, and then I found out that she went home every weekend. I changed my patterns and started going home just about every weekend. If I didn't have something I had to do, I would call Doris and see if I could catch a ride. And,
now, to go back to your comment that Mom made about thinking you were flirting with everyone in the car, in the course of this podcast, I've heard you talk about you had a girlfriend back home, and then there was a girl in Tennessee. And so it sounds like you did talk to different girls, despite you saying, hey, I've got I was 2 left feet trying to talk to girls and awkward as can be. But also something you point out, and dating, the way people date is vastly different now than it was in your time, and probably it was different from your time than it was from your parents' time. But for me, being in school, I can't imagine like seeing somebody and going like, oh wow, I'm going to open the door for her every day. Like, where did you get this tactic? And today, do you think... It's
the only shot I had. It was that was it. I mean, she's going up the steps, she's going in the building. She's not going to strike up anything. I got to do something. And so I was trying to, the best way I could figure to get her attention was to open the door and hold it for her. And
back in the episode about Grandma, you mentioned probably going home on one of these trips that you started more frequently doing and talking to her about this girl. And it sounded like Grandma had the advice to you of, well, you just need to ask her. Maybe that was some sage advice from Grandma of like, you're being a little too passive, just opening the door, you're standing in the shadows, you need to be direct. Do you think there's any part of her that was just saying like, hey, stop being a wallflower weirdo standing off in the corner, go be direct and let her know that you're interested?
Well, I think when I had the talk with her was after I had finally met Susan in the car. And then what happened with me and my lack of self-confidence and everything, I really enjoyed talking to her, and it felt like she did me. So, but it was spring quarter, which is quarters are short. And I didn't, I had borrowed after I got to know, let's see. Yeah, I think that's right. That's what it was. But anyway, I was taking History 50, but I hadn't bought a book yet. And she was saying she loved History 50. She told me this on one of the trips, that she really enjoyed it, and she had a Professor Todd. And I said, that's who I've got for History 50. And she said, well, I've got my textbook if you want to borrow it. I said, yeah, that'd be great. Keep me from having to buy a book. And so we went through the quarter, and I'd go by to see her and talk to her different times. And I just, sit out in the dorm, out there on the dorm porch with her. And I really liked her, but I didn't go over, I'd never ask her out on a date. And I guess I was so infatuated with her and that she was nice. And I got afraid that she just enjoyed having a friend and some company. And that if I tried to get it to the next level of asking her out, that she'd go, oh no, he's wanting to get romantic, and this is not what I want. I wanted a friend. So I couldn't bring myself to take it to that level. I was just afraid to risk. I liked what I had so good. Somebody, if I'd see on campus, we'd sit down, have a Coke or something like that. And
the classic ordeal of, do you risk ruining the friendship?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the other thing that was going on, there was, another girl that I was real close with and dating some, but she was in school in Tennessee, and we would not put limits on each other. It was just like we'd see each other when we could, which wasn't very often, but there were some complications going on there other than the long distance, not with her and me, but with family more. I was seen as a long-haired hippie art major that was never going to amount to much. So I was not necessarily every girl's mother's dream, I guess. And so that had not really gone that much further, but that's where, I was talking with my mom later as I became friends with Susan. I really came to think a lot of her and found out that we were a lot alike. Our values and backgrounds and everything were so much alike. And then,
what would you estimate the time span between when you first had that first ride home with her and introduced yourself and when you finally asked her out? Was it just a quarter?
Well, a quarter went by, and that's sort of what the point that I was getting to. She called me and said, hey, my classes, I get out of classes today. It was a Wednesday. And she said, I'm heading home. I think her brother-in-law was coming to pick her up. And she said, I need to get my history book. And I said, well, my exam's on Friday. And I need that book, to study for my exams. I said, I'll tell you what, give me your address and I'll sell the book for you at the book exchange and send you the money. And she said, no, I like history. I want to hold on to my history book. And I said, well, I can mail the book to you. And she said, well, I know. You can come see me this summer and bring the book to me. And, I thought, yeah, hey, that's a great idea.
But
I agreed I would do that, and then I get home for this, when I finished up my exams and got home, that old self-confidence or lack thereof started working on me, and it was going like, she was probably just kidding you. If you call her, she's going to go, oh God, he took me serious. All this went through my mind, and I kept putting it off and putting it off. And
in your defense, if there's somebody listening that's from a more modern perspective, that was probably to you appeared to be an offhand comment. And then you leave for a week or two and you're thinking about it and you start questioning, was it? Did she really mean it? Like you were just saying. And you don't have text messaging. There's no casual conversation to check back in. And that, for my generation, that was very much a thing. And I'm sure it's still is a thing now, is dropping into DMs, but just using the communication tools that we have today to casually float stuff out there and see if you get a bite. And if you don't get a bite, you go, oh, well, I wasn't serious anyway. But if you do get a bite, you can then progress to the next step. But you guys didn't have that. I mean, I guess you could have exchanged phone numbers instead of just addresses and maybe given a phone call. But even a phone call is a little more formal than a text message. And so I guess I can see in your defense how you might have downplayed it in your mind over time.
Yeah, that's you've hit exactly. You must have been there too before, because that's exactly what I did. And as long as I hadn't called her, I was safe, because if I did and she went, oh God, no, then it was over. And I had broken through.
Knowing Mom and knowing how shy she was, that was as clear a signal as she could possibly send to you.
Absolutely. And she is so honest. And that's the thing that I didn't know at that time, that she would not have said to me, you can come see me and bring me the book this summer, if it were not okay to do. Right. That's just the way she was, or the way she is, that I didn't realize. And so I called a ride back to school. I think the first time back, my dad and Mom took me the first weekend, one or the other. And then the next weekend, I came home and I'd called Doris to see if I'd catch a ride with her. And she said, yeah, sure. And Doris stopped in Four Oaks at Fountain Coates Gulf Station and picked Susan up. And
it was fall semester, right? After the summer?
Yeah, this is fall semester.
So, or fall quarter, whenever you were
fall quarter.
Heading back for your fourth year.
All right. On the way back with her, that when we picked her up, she was really cool. There was no, hey, how are you? How was your summer? No, nothing. And I sat in the back and she wouldn't talk to me. Yes, no, real clipped, no conversation. And we got to her dorm, and I got out like I always did to take her luggage, carried up to the dorm. And she turned around to me, looked me right straight, just as blank, and said, I can get my own luggage. And I was like, well, why? I mean, I got out to help you with. I can get my own luggage. I was like, okay. But then she grabs her luggage and I wheeled her a couple of steps up, and I said, have I done something wrong? Have I, you act like you're mad with me. And she set her luggage down and turned and looked me right straight on and said, I don't like being stood up. I said, what? You were supposed to bring me my history book, and you said you'd bring it to me this summer, and you didn't. And I said, I thought you were just kidding with me. I didn't think you were serious about me coming to see you. And she said, I don't joke about things like that, and I want my history book. And I said, well, I've got it. I brought it back with me. I'll get it to you. Will you give me a rain check? And she looked at me and said, I'll think about it. And so I said, well, I'll call you. So I called her and she said I could come to her dorm. And so I went over there and I brought her book to her. And that was the first time we sat out on the porch of her dorm together, actually. And so we talked a while, and then we set up a time that I'd come back to see her one afternoon. And we sat out there and talked, and she said, let's go for a walk. And I said, okay. And there was a little neighborhood, an older neighborhood, just really pretty houses in it and hedges and things. And it was right across from the dorm. So we crossed over, I guess that was 10th Street, and walked up in that neighborhood. And and things had gotten by then real friendly back to where they were. And I was saying I was so sorry that I was miserable the whole summer because I wanted to go over there so bad, and yet I was afraid she would say no. And so I said I'm sorry, and we walked some more, and we got back, and it was this really high, I forget what they're called, red tips, I believe, red tip hedge. And the road kind of had a little S curve in it, and that followed the curve of the road. And we stopped there kind of in the, where those things were, kind of in the shade of those red tips that were real tall. And we were talking, and I pulled her up close to me, and she didn't resist. And I kissed her for the first time, standing there on that little street across from her dorm.
And how soon after coming back from for the fall semester or fall quarter was that? Was that like within a week, or?
It was probably within a week or two that that we took that walk. During that summer is when I was pulling weeds out of the soybeans. The soybeans were starting to dry in, get ready to harvest, and Dad wanted all the cockleburrs out of the fields. It was then or in the early, I actually think it was the early fall when I came home one weekend before I went back over there to see her. And that's when, Mom wanted to go with me because she just wanted to spend that time with me. I can understand that now. But we were out there walking the rows of soybeans and pulling up cockleburrs. And when we get a full load, I'd gather them up and take them to the end of the field and come back and meet her. And it was just a great time with her out there and just talking over things with her. And, it was so good to get a woman's perspective because I didn't understand that perspective. And I didn't have a grasp of it. And that's when I was telling her, I see these things with this one relationship, and I don't know what, where that's going to go. And but there's this girl I've met, and I just really, really like her, but we've become really good friends. And, she likes to talk to me about stuff, and I try to give her good feedback on things. But I'm afraid to date her, and I don't know if there's anything there for her or not in that way. And that's when Mom said, well, son, that's the only way to find out. And I said, what's that? And she said, go out with her, ask her out.
I want to point out it's also it's very mom-like for her when she gets mad to make sure you know that she's mad and make sure you know one way or another how you're responsible. So that tracks very well. And can be a bad thing, but it's also, to your point, a good thing. You never had to worry about where she stood with you. She wasn't, a manipulative kind of person in that way. She was very...
You knew if you'd done something that jacked her jaw up, but it can be very difficult to find out what that was. That could be a Sherlock Holmes episode trying to figure out, what did I do something? What did I? No.
Well, really briefly, I'm assuming you got to know her over that last year more so than you did the year before. Mm-hmm. And I once asked Mom, I would always ask her stuff like, what was your taste in music? Because you had people that you liked musically, and Mom was always just sort of like, I don't know. And her interest tended to go back toward an era before her own. So she liked classic Hollywood movies and musicals and things like that. Not so much the counterculture 1960s rock and roll kind of stuff. And so as a kid learning about the late 60s and early 70s and that the music scene and all the crazy counterculture stuff that was going on, of course you have curiosity of like, were you into that? wanting to ask your parents. And I remember asking her point blank about that, and she was just sort of like, she always poo-pooed it, like, I was never into that. I was always keeping to myself and doing my studies, and kind of like a square vibe of just this studious person is the what she wanted me to take from it, at least. Would you say that that's accurate in your recollection of how she was in school?
Yeah, she was a straight up kid. She was very involved in her church up here in Four Oaks, and she was went as far as you go in the Acteens and Queen Regent or whatever with Scepter and all this stuff. She followed the rules. She wasn't a rule breaker, and she was what a lot of people would have described probably as being a bit uptight. But from that standpoint of don't break the rules, don't do something you're not supposed to do. And I remember one time I had talked her against her better judgment. I had a bunch of figure drawing studies that I had to do and turn in, and I couldn't go because I was working at school. I couldn't go to any of the other figure drawing classes to do them because when I wasn't in actual class, I was working over there. So I talked her into agreeing to model for me. You could go, at that point, they had to say you could go into the girls' dorms, but you had to leave the door open, to the dorm and so forth. And she didn't want to go anywhere else. She was going to put on her swimsuit. Same swimsuit she took her swimming test in all at East Carolina. And she was going to wear the swimsuit, and she would model for me. So I had her sitting in a chair, kind of sideways, with her arms around on the back of the chair and her head laid down on that. So I was drawing the twist to her body and part of her back, and I was doing this drawing. In fact, I still have that drawing somewhere. And her roommate at that time was a girl named Connie. No, it wasn't Connie. It was a blonde-headed girl. But anyway, I finally convinced Susan everything will be all right. We're not doing anything bad. This is fine. I mean, you sit out in the courtyard in the swimsuit and lay out there and study and stuff. It's the same thing. The door's open. This is fine. And she very reluctantly agreed. Okay, if it'll help you. So we get started, and I get this one drawing almost done. And her roommate's mother comes up and walks in the room and screams like we were both naked. Oh my God, what is going on? And goes running out of the room, Well, God, oh my, you cannot imagine. Your mother.
Right.
Imagine your mother who would not do a bad thing.
Right.
Ever. Me putting her in a position to where her roommate's mother thought she was
doing
just
something terrible.
Something terrible. And but that's the kind of luck I had,
Right. So she was very rule follower, very and I know, because I'm this way too, very self-conscious of what other people are doing, or how you're perceived by other people. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that probably tends to make you want to be more quiet and be more recessed away from the spotlight, which tracks with both her and me. Mm-hmm. But got a good bit more that I hope to get through in this, so we're going to skip a couple questions that I had here. You did one of the things, of course, you found her attractive, but you mentioned how you just had similar values and similar interests, and And so I kind of had a question here, just, what else about her personality attracted you to her? But I think you've kind of already answered that in a way. Her honesty, her values, and just having seen you my whole life, the two of you interact with one another. You did have a conversational chemistry when you weren't bickering or fussing or doing anything that all couples do from time to time. But you had a good rapport with each other and communicated at a very similar level that just seemed very natural, even in hindsight, myself looking back on it. So it seems like that was something that maybe both of you recognized pretty early on, was that you had a good rapport and a good communication with each other.
Yep, there was an innocence about her that was attractive as well, on top of being just beautiful. And then the other thing, probably sounds strange, but she had a good sense of humor. She got my weird humor, and my humor is a little bit off the wall. But she got it and came back off of it. She would, it was hard to get the best of her.
Right. My favorite memories growing up are when you would realize that you were saying something that was getting away with her, and then you'd ham it up even more and get her to just lose it and start laughing hysterically. And she had a very contagious laugh. There still does have a very contagious laugh.
Yes, she does.
It sounds like you were in the dating stages for a pretty short amount of time, because you got engaged and married not too long after college. Is that right?
Yeah. We had a year after college, but she had another year at East Carolina, and so I kind of stretched out some of my classes, and she and I graduated together, though she started a year behind me.
Right, because she was born in October and you were born in March, so different class years. Well, when it comes to the engagement, what do you remember about that? Was there a big plan and some kind of, here's how I'm going to do it, the way a lot of folks do it now, or was it a more low-key kind of situation? And did she expect it, or did you surprise her?
The thing that would fire her up was if somebody raised that question, how did you propose, to Susan? And I'd say, well, she proposed to me. Whew, boy, that would make her hot. Boy, I mean, she was like her mother, that there was no, that's something you didn't joke about,
Right.
But we actually talked about it a lot. And I remember, like, we'd go out to Pitt Plaza, go to a movie or something, and there was a jewelry store that was there near the theater, and stopping and looking at rings and talking about rings, and found out she wanted an oval stone. She wanted an oval engagement ring. And which were very hard to find. It was one of those things where I didn't do the formal engagement thing, but one year for Christmas, I made got a little wooden box, and I painted it, and then painted, I forget what it was, I painted on the cover, on the lid to it and everything, but I fixed it up real pretty for Christmas and put the date in there. And then I had purchased a ring. This was the first year I was out working. I'd saved up money and purchased the ring. And I had to order it to get an oval. And I put that in a little ring box and put it in that box with, some stuff around it, some little, what do you call that stuff that looks like straw? But it's paper. But anyway, I put it down in that little box and gave her the box, and she thought that was, what it was the little box. And she was looking at it and, turning it all around and, did you do this? You painted this, and I was like, yeah, And then I said, well, look at the inside, look at the lid. And she raised the lid up, and I had Christmas, whatever year it was, the date, I can't remember right now.
Well, when did you
And,
graduate? What year did you graduate?
I think it was 73 that I had Christmas of 73 because we got married in 74. But I did go to her dad beforehand and told him that I wanted to marry her. I remember he was sitting in that little room where he used to watch TV and smoke, his pipe. And he was just as calm as he could be about it. He didn't, he just sat there smoking his pipe. And, well, I kind of figured that was coming. That's what he said, And I said, she doesn't know it yet, but I wanted to ask you, before I formally asked her. When she looked at the lid of the box and then saw the stuff and started pulling it out, and then she went, she saw the little box and opened the box up. And, we were sitting on the floor in her living room there at her mother's house. And, of course, she grabbed me and squealed and hugged me and got the ring out and I opened it up and got it out and put it on her finger. And, and she went running in there to show her mother and her daddy and so forth. But that was at Christmas of 73.
So they didn't give you a hard time?
No. Mm-mm. No, they never did.
They didn't mind the crazy art guy?
No. Somehow or another they found they found a way to get around that. And they were always so nice to me. Everybody joked about when we moved over here later and lived across the street. They were like, "Do you ever see Everybody Loves Raymond?" And I said, it was nothing like that. She never gave me, or he never gave me, the first problem, the first concern. They were just supportive and kind and, loved y'all to death. They enjoyed you and, they both loved you to pieces just like they did the girls. But your granddaddy, I'm sure you remember him taking you to ride on the little cart and picking you up from school. And so
yeah, I have nothing but very pleasant memories of both Granddaddy and Grandma Searles. They both took time with me in their own ways, and they could bicker with each other, like all couples do, but they were very nice to me. They were very nice to me and very loving grandparents. So a Christmas engagement, and then it seems like a fairly short engagement, because wasn't it June that you got married then, just 6 months later?
Yeah, June the 23rd.
And that was at her church that she had been so involved with, First Baptist Four Oaks. What do you remember about planning for that wedding and then the actual day of the wedding itself?
Not a lot about the planning of the wedding. I remember going with her to look at china and things like that. But she picked out, the fine china. And she took her mom and some girlfriends and stuff and did that kind of stuff. But, I was working my first job and just sort of like, okay, whatever, I didn't have a whole lot of input on the wedding.
And was she working as a teacher at that point?
She was working as a teacher. She got she wanted to come over to Harnett County, over there where I was from, and near my folks. She and my mom and dad hit it off right off the bat. They just got along great. And my dad, he was you could tell he thought she was something. He would never say anything, but he paid her more attention than I expected him to, and he would talk through his teeth, and he would say that sweet Susan Searles, and he'd whistle, through his teeth as he'd say it. And that's what he'd say to her almost every time. He'd say, "Well, there's that sweet Susan Searles Sloan," after we were married.
Right.
So he had all those S's. But I was very blessed that Susan loved both of my parents deeply, and I loved hers. And, that was just amazing. I've always said that was one of the greatest blessings I ever had, was how much my wife loved my parents and how much they loved her.
Yeah, that is a blessing for sure. Now, the wedding itself, I remember you talking to me about the photographer and how he kind of made the day seem like it blurred by a little bit faster. But when I think back to my wedding, it was a blur. Weddings go by so quickly. But looking at a room full of people that love you on both sides from different parts of your life, friends and family and all of that, that had to be a gratifying feeling as well. But just tell me, what do you remember about your wedding? Briefly, we're running out of time. But
Okay, but the strange to say, this is the thing that I remember the most. In her church, in Susan's church, we got married in her church. There was a lady there who was, like the Miss Manners, who knew more about social graces than anybody else, and she was the protector of the church as well. We got married June the 23rd. And it was a very hot June the 23rd. It was a Sunday. The one thing that was going to be nice was we had the wedding after church. It was a little later in the afternoon, but the church would be cool because of the air being there. And we went in and got all the decorations and everything set up in the church. The florist came in, put in the flowers, and they put the candles up and everything. And right after church, and then we headed home to get ready for the wedding and everything. And this lady, we get to the church for the wedding, and it's like 89 degrees inside the church. I mean, it was hot, and it was getting hotter, and that's with nobody in the church. And then they started filling the church up, and the temperature kept going up, and nobody could get the air on. Nobody knew where it was. None of us did, and Susan's family weren't familiar with the church and the controls and everything. So I was wearing glasses, and I was watching her come down the aisle with her dad, and she had this very apprehensive look on her face, and she told me later she was worried her dad had a back injury that made his walking very unsteady, and she was afraid he was going to fall. So she had this apprehensive look on her face, which I misread as like, oh my God, she's having second thoughts, Right. And I'm already sweating like a bull, and I remember, it was so hot, and looking around, everybody had their programs for the wedding out fanning. Water was running down the lenses of my glasses to where it made it hard to even see her when she got up there close to me. We got through everything, and I remember the photographer it was hot, he wanted to get it shot and get gone. So he pushed us from one thing to the other. And as soon as she came out of the aisle, when we came out of the church, he was turning us around to go get lined up to get the pictures while everybody else came out, and the reception was down in the basement. Come on up here, let's do the garter thing. All right, let's go out here, let's go down here, cut the cake, get in the car, take pictures of the car. And I was going down the street, and I was like heading to her mother's, and I said, we haven't even been to the reception, And he had pushed us out, and everybody's out there throwing their ice and everything. He had everybody come out from the reception, and we're back at her mother's house, and Greg had come up from Florida or Atlanta, and Greg Ressler, and hardly got, so like, hey, and that's about it for what I got to see of him. And I had friends that had come from East Carolina and, several places.
And
so it just went really, really fast.
And go back or
I should have, but it was almost like I was just taking orders that whole time, doing what people told me to do. I watched.
Sounds like a comprehensive wedding planner would have been good. Somebody who was orchestrating not only.
Well, it's why I've told everybody since then that's getting married, don't let the photographer control your day. Let him record the events as they happen. Don't let him push the events.
Right.
or make them happen.
Important
But
thing to do when you're interviewing photographers, ask them what their process is like.
yeah, and but I mean, I don't mean to make it sound like it was bad. It wasn't. It was a very sweet time, and she was so beautiful. She was gorgeous. She had her hair up, and she had long hair.
I've
at
seen
that time.
the photo that you guys have in your house. She had a nice dress.
Oh yeah, she'd make a little bitty dog break a big old chain.
When you, I guess that's where I get all my good looks from. So you, so you left eventually and went on a honeymoon, and you went to Topsail, right?
There was a couple in Mamers. In fact, they were my brother's mother and father-in-law, and he was the postmaster, and they had a little country store. I'd always been friends with them and thought a lot of them, and they had called us and said, "We want to give you and Susan a week at our cottage at Topsail for your wedding present."
Oh, a whole week.
Yeah, and they said, "You can take it as your honeymoon. You can take it, later. I don't know what your honeymoon plans are, but you just do what you want to do." So we were really thankful for that. That was such a kind gesture on their part, and it sure helped us out because we kind of did our wedding, she and I, ourselves, in terms of the cost on it and everything. We went down there and had a great time. But as is the case with me, like with the wedding, nothing really went the way we thought we had planned it to go. Some things didn't. There always had to be something that happened, and sure enough, with that, we did too. And I don't know if you want to pick that up in another episode or...
I mean, just briefly, I know you're alluding to the car situation, but how did that even happen?
As we started down to the beach, and ironically, I'll mention one thing that who would have ever known, the last shot that the photographer took of us was in front of her Buick Regal.
1972? 1970?
73.
A 1973 Buick. It was black, right?
It had a dark green top. It was white, but a dark green top and dark green interior, emerald green. Or hunter green. It was really a pretty car. Her first car ever. And I had a little two-seater sports car, so her car was perfect for us going on our honeymoon. And we had it parked out in front of our mother and dad's house, and the last picture taken of us was there at the car with our house to be as a backdrop.
That's cool.
That was behind us. And we took off to Topsail, and as we were going down there, we saw this just huge, towering, like a thundercloud, way, way, way off. I mean, it was huge. And from the time we got out the other side of 95, you could see it and see the lightning working in. And as it got darker, the lightning became more apparent. And, we were like, oh my goodness, somebody's catching it wherever that is. Whew, I'd hate to be there, And it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then as we get to Topsail, it is right on top of us, and it is raining so hard and had been raining so hard for so long that we were driving like 8 miles an hour down the street going down to South Topsail where the cottage was, and it was raining so hard you couldn't see. We were using flashes of lightning to try to spot the cottage, and we had pictures of it. So we knew what to look for. They had a little A-frame over the doorway, and we were looking for that. And Susan finally said, that's it, I see it. And so we pull in the driveway, and of course it is raining so hard, we can't get out now. And she said, oh, Miss Patterson said you could pull under the house on one side. that they had packed it with clay and gravel, and you could pull into that one side under the cottage. And I said, oh, great. That'll work out great. So I said, which side? She said, I don't remember. And I said, well.
So you had a 50-50 shot.
There's one right in front of us, right directly in front of the driveway. And that's close to the steps. And there's a set of steps on the backside that come down right to the under the house. And I'm going to say it makes the most sense that this would be the side they would pack the stuff in, so you just drive in the driveway and straight into it. And she said, yeah, that makes sense to me. So I pull forward and drive up under the cottage and stopped and turned to look at her, like, boom, we're here. And I turned around and looked at her, and when I turned and looked at her, I felt like you're in an elevator. I saw the car was just going down. And she said, what on earth, what is going on? I don't know. And finally the car stops. I went to open the door, and the door wouldn't open. I rolled the window down, and I look, and the sand, like quicksand, it was up over the door jambs where the door wouldn't open. I'd never seen anything like that in my life. I crawled out of the window and come around to open her door. I was going to carry her upstairs, and I couldn't get her door open. The sand was up over her door. All that water had run under the cottage, and we obviously had picked the wrong side. I pulled her out through the window, and we went upstairs, and there was a little combination thing to get the key out of the box, and we went in and didn't have a flashlight. No, we didn't. We didn't have the box. They told us to leave the key in the box. They gave us the key and told us to leave it in there when we left. And we go in the house, and if you went in a cave and put a black bag over your head, that's how dark it was in that house. I mean, I've never been anywhere so dark in my life. Only time you could see anything was if lightning flashed. You could get a little bit of a glimpse of where you were, but it was feeling your way around, to not trip over something. And they had told us that the breaker box was in the kitchen. Well, it turns out it was in a cabinet in the kitchen. So I was going along feeling all the walls and everything for a breaker box, and finally stumbling through matches, I found a box of matches going through the cabinets. What felt like a box of matches. I guess I had it there for the grill or something, and I struck a match, and then I could see there was one cabinet that was flatter than the others, and I opened it, and there was the breaker box. I got the lights on. When the rain kind of passed, I got everything in the house, and I even brought a stereo with me and everything, but that storm was still rocking, and the whole house. It really scared Susan one time after we got into bed. The closet door swung open, and just from the wind was making the house sway so much.
Yeah, I think that was the same house that I visited as a child a couple times, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I can kind of remember that. So you did you dig it out by hand? Did you find a shovel or?
I dug it out by hand. We didn't have, now you got to realize we didn't have any food with us. We didn't have any kind of phone.
So you had, getting it out was something you had to do pretty quickly.
I had to get the car out to get food, to get anything,
Right.
And so I went down there and started looking. I found some boards and started trying to dig it with the boards. And these two little boys from Lillington, there was a Womble family that were next door to them that they knew. And those little guys thought it was really interesting. I think they thought Susan was really interesting because she was out there, in shorts and a top with me. And she was pretty. So, I mean, even those little boys knew she was pretty. You could tell that, and they asked, they said things to me about, is that your wife, But anyway, I struck up a conversation with them, and you don't know if you got a shovel over there, do you? Yeah, my daddy's got a shovel, So here they come with a shovel, and then I was like, have you got any more boards or anything over there? So I dug out one wheel down deep enough that I could get the jack under it, and I put some boards down and I jacked it up on that corner, and then I pushed sand back into the hole and put a board under the tire. And then I went to the other side and did the same thing. Jacked it up, raked the sand to where I could get the chassis off the sand, because it went down to where the bumper was down in the sand too. So I had to dig a pit behind the car to put concrete blocks and stuff in to get the jack in, and then block it. And I went all the way around that car doing that. Bless those little guys' hearts. They kept going and looking for what I needed. They were about Jacob's age, about 8, 9 years old, cute as they could be, and they kept bringing stuff to me.
You did eventually get it out, and I was hoping that we could maybe talk a little bit about the newlywed first year or two, both of your careers, how that was going. Maybe we can save that for the next episode that is after my child is born. That will be, I've got it down here as talking about your first or the first half of your career was spent at a place called Smith Advertising. But maybe we can bundle in some of the newlywed stuff there, because it wasn't too long after you were married that you started working at Smith Advertising, right?
Right.
So maybe we can bundle those in a little bit there.
Not too long,
One
thing I'll say, since this is about Susan, I'd say is that through all of that stuff, she handled everything with just grace, from the not having the air conditioning, which I found out, I left out a part of it. That lady had gone over there after we left and turned off the air conditioning because she didn't want the air from the air conditioning to blow wax off the candles on the carpet. So she endeared herself to me greatly. But through all of that, Susan was just grace and never complained. And with all we went through, having to be drug out of the car through the window like Daisy Duke to the doors opening during the night and everything else, she handled everything well. So I guess maybe the honeymoon prepared her for life with me.
Yeah. That's sweet. Well, I appreciate you recounting all this, and thank you, listeners, for letting us go a little bit long on this one. We will be back recording in a couple of weeks. Look forward to having much more to share with you then. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Dad, again, and we'll catch you next time.
All right.